Every UFC champion has a couple fighters that keep them up late at night in their nightmares thinking about how am I ever gonna beat that guy. So today we're going over the 2 nightmare matchups for each UFC champion. Me and Lucas each pick 2 fighters. Let's see how it goes. Lucas, who do you have for Flyweight?
For Flyweight, the number one most obvious pick is going to be Kai France because of that scary Flyweight knockout power.
Exactly. He has the most first round finishes out of any flyweight. Pantoja is going to dominate majority of the fighters he faces on the ground, but Pantoja is going to be at a severe disadvantage on the feet here.
And I don't think Pantoja really has like any nightmare matchups like some of the future champions. Like there's some ones coming up where there's just awful matchups for the champions. But Kai France does have just that one-shot power where you can get put out at any second.
Who is your second guy?
So my second person is going to be Tatsuro Taira.
Okay.
Because if Tatsuro Taira can get a body lock and lock up a submission, it's over.
That's it, yeah. I went with a different Japanese fighter. I went with Kai Asakura just because of the complete unknown. You know, we've never seen this guy fight in the UFC, so it's a lot harder to game plan for this guy. How is this guy gonna approach the UFC? And, you know, he's a champion, a worldwide champion, so seeing him come out to the UFC, it's gonna be a big test for Pantoja.
Yeah, Pantoja doesn't really have a lot of tape he can study of the same UFC rules because the Ryzen rules are different.
Exactly.
So a lot of Kai Asakura's finishing techniques are not allowed in the UFC, so I'm interested in how that matchup is gonna go. I was thinking about doing Kai Asakura, but I think in the UFC, Taira and Kai France are like the 2 guys who I think they do have a chance at beating Pantoja.
Another sleeper guy from down the rankings, I know we both don't like him a ton anymore, Manel Kopp. He does have the striking to beat Pantoja.
Yeah, but I think we saw in the Makhachev fight, he's not going to have the takedown defense or the scrambling ability to keep up with him.
Yeah. All right, moving on to Bantamweight, Lucas. The first guy should be pretty obvious. Who's your first Bantamweight?
Well, I mean, Merab's already ducking him, so it has to be Umar Nurmagomedov.
Exactly. The guy that is better than Merab at basically everything.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
He's just better at wrestling. He's better at striking.
This one specifically is a nightmare matchup for the champion. You know Merab is up at night thinking, oh, I'm not going to fight for a while. I want to enjoy my belt. Come on, dude.
Yeah, you know, Merab's like, yeah, I'll fight him during March or April, whenever Ramadan is.
Yeah.
He's probably like, yeah, I'll fight him then. Or I'll fight him the month after, you know, after this guy's fasted all day. Then I'll fight him.
One thing I wanted to bring up was Merab was game to fight Sean O'Malley in like November or December. And then he's like, oh, I want to wait and enjoy my championship belt when it comes to fighting Umar. So that's like 2 completely different scenarios. You can't just say, oh, I'm ready to fight. And then, no, actually, I'm not when it comes to facing a different person.
Yeah, he's going to want to get the first title defense off of a figure eight or a yawn, and then go out and have his, so he has technically 1 title defense and then go in and fight Umar.
And everything on Twitter now is he's making up this Sean O'Malley rematch.
Yeah.
Like that's what he's building up. And the UFC literally could just put that together randomly.
Well, I think that the UFC definitely could do the Sean O'Malley rematch. I think there's probably more money in that fight too.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it's going to be as easy this time for Merab against Sean.
Yeah, I think Sean is really going to have some urgency. He's not so worried about actually losing a fight. You know, that loss that he had against Cheeto, let's be real, it was a fluke. And then that first loss, the real loss against Merab, I think maybe there was a bit of weight taken off of, okay, now I can just go for it. No more risks.
Exactly. You know, I'm not going to be Habib at this point. You know, like I'm going to do whatever it takes, you know, if I have to put myself into a vulnerable situation.
Hopefully, if, you know, he also could just go out there and get out wrestled again.
Yeah. All right. And who is your second guy for Bantamweight?
My second guy for Bantamweight is going to be O'Malley.
Okay.
I think that in a rematch, he could easily clip Merab. I mean, look, it's the exact same thing that we were saying in the lead up to 306. O'Malley has the possibility to absolutely land a pinpoint accurate strike that just puts your lights out. Merab doesn't have that ability. He's going to grind you down. And so I think if they do another matchup, that's a total of 10 rounds where O'Malley has the possibility to put him out. 5 rounds. If he didn't put him out in 10 rounds, I would be surprised.
Yeah, that's very fair show. I went with Figueiredo. I just think that Figgy is so well-rounded and is a veteran inside of the UFC. So if Figgy can go out and beat Jan, I think he's going to be a tough matchup for Merab.
And the power. He knocked down Cheeto for the first time. Like, that's major power.
Sean never did that.
Exactly.
All right, Lucas, who is Ilia Toporia's nightmare matchup?
This is a weird one because I do feel he's one of the better, well-rounded fighters at the top. So my first nightmare matchup is going to be Movsar.
Okay.
I don't know. I wasn't confident in this one because let's be real. No one wants to see Movsar get that belt, but he is strong on the ground. He can hold you down very well. And how I thought about it was, who are the guys who are never gonna even try to engage with Topuria on the feet, right? Like, who's just gonna go out there and execute their game plan like a Merab would? And it's gonna be Movsar.
It made me feel a little bit sick when you said Movsar. Like, I refuse to put that guy in a list.
Get a bodily reaction to the word Movsar.
I didn't like that. My first guy for featherweight, I went with Diego Lopez. I think that Ilya might be one of the most well-rounded fighters in the UFC, but I think that Diego Lopez is also one of the most well-rounded fighters. I think that Diego Lopez can keep up with Topuria on the feet, and then with how strong Lopez's jiu-jitsu is, like, he almost outclassed Brian Ortega's jiu-jitsu, and Brian Ortega has elite level jiu-jitsu. So with the jiu-jitsu of Lopez, he could potentially be able to stop the wrestling and purely keep that fight on the feet. And what we've seen with Lopez is it only takes one with Lopez the same way it only takes one with Topuria. I just think that they're so similar in a way that it makes him a nightmare matchup.
Yeah, they're almost mirror matchups of each other, just slightly different.
Yeah, Topuria's wrestling, Lopez's jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and they both have power.
Yeah.
Okay, my second pick for featherweight is going to be Aljo. Again, similar to Movsar, where I was thinking, who's just going to go out there and execute a game plan? Aljo is going to just get on his back and stay there for as long as possible. Try and outpoint the rounds. I don't think he's going to engage in the feet very much, and I think that he could get it done.
Fair shout. My second guy is the guy who's facing at 308, Max Holloway.
Yeah.
I have said multiple times on this channel that Ilia Topuria is pound for pound the most powerful guy in the UFC, which means that he has elite level striking. I think that the only guy inside of this division that could outstrike him is Max Holloway.
For sure.
So that makes him a nightmare matchup because Max Holloway has the potential to put out Ilya.
And here's the thing, with Ilya, you know that for his striking to work, he has to get on the inside. And with Max, you know that his striking, it's just volume, it's pressure. So he can strike wherever he is and he keeps up the entire round, right? He gets damage from the outside, he gets damage in the pocket. Whereas Ilya, he needs to work his way inside, get you up against the cage, and then just land that 3-punch combination.
Exactly. And we've seen Max countless times be able to get out of the cage. So I think he's going to fare better than Volk or Bryce Mitchell or Josh Emmett, the guys that Ilya has gone out there and destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, think about his Gaethje fight. Gaethje had him up against the fence a couple times, and he was able to circle laterally and get out of there.
Yeah, just wait for the dive roll. I think it's coming out. Like, if Ilya's pushing him against the cage, break fall number 6 out of there.
Just dive through the legs.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to lightweight, Lucas. In a division where there's clearly no one who's a nightmare matchup for Islam. He's the nightmare matchup for anyone. Who's Islam's toughest matchup, we'll say?
Well, Islam's toughest matchup, hopefully the person who's getting matchmaked with him in the very near future, is going to be Arman Tsarukyan. Someone who can keep up with him in the wrestling, hopefully, and someone who's not afraid to strike and stand and bang a little bit. I think Arman has a fair shot at getting the championship belt. I do think Islam is a little bit more refined in the boxing right now from what we saw with Poirier. And obviously his wrestling and the work ethic is second to none.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also have Arman as my first guy. He's really the only guy in that division that has a chance to even keep up with Islam on the ground. And I think that he's worse on the ground, and I think he's also worse on the feet. It just proves how dominant Islam is. But if there's anyone that has really a chance to beat Islam, it's Arman.
For my second pick in lightweight, this is someone who I didn't initially think of when I was making this list, but the more I thought about it, it would be a very interesting matchup, and I went with Max Holloway. And the reason I went with Max Holloway is because he's very hard to take down. Surprisingly, he's very mobile. And if you look at his last fights against Volkanovski, he gets a little bit dominated in the clinch, but he doesn't get taken down very much. So I think that with the striking that Holloway has, he has a fair shot at winning that belt.
Yeah, and we saw what Poirier did against Islam. And you have Max Holloway, who's arguably better than Poirier. I would say that Max Holloway is better than Poirier at this current moment. So you never really know what Holloway could do. My second guy, I really thought about Holloway, but since you went Holloway, I'm gonna give a different shout. How about Renato Moicano?
Oh, that's a tough ask for Moicano.
100%, but in terms of skill sets for true lightweights, no one really has as good of grappling outside of Charles, who's already been beaten by Islam, and Arman. So it's kind of was like, Moicano, you know, maybe what we saw him do to BSD absolutely destroyed him. So
yeah, and maybe he does have a little bit more power and a little bit more cardio when he moved up to lightweight. So it's an interesting matchup. Again, I don't want to pick someone who Islam has already beat.
Exactly. So it's tough. Like I always thought about Gamrot, but he just lost to Hooker. So
yeah, if you lose to Hooker, you got no shot at that belt.
Yeah, it's tough because no one's comes close to Islam.
Yeah, I think realistically, Islam probably retires without another
retirement, staph infection.
Oh.
All right, let's move it on to welterweight. Who is the toughest opponent for Belal Muhammad?
So the toughest matchup for Belal Muhammad is someone who, surprisingly, he hasn't faced yet, and that's Usman. For some reason, he just managed to slip past Usman, and it's because of the whole Leon, and then he took a little bit of a layoff. So I think that with Usman's power in the clinch, like this is where he dominates. The clinch is where Usman just goes to work, so many clinch strikes, so active, and someone who can match him in the wrestling. We saw Usman go up against Hamzat, and Hamzat wasn't able to get a finish. Neither is Belal. And then in the striking, we saw Usman in that first or second Leon fight. He was very strong in the striking as well. So I think that Usman can match him if Usman is still in his prime and he still really wants it. It's going to depend on his next fight majorly. But the ability that Usman has in all of his areas of the game is going to give Belal serious problems.
I really thought about Usman from a stylistic standpoint, but seeing the way that Izzy's performed lately, Volk's performed lately, it was just like, could Usman actually beat Belal? And I think that Belal probably beats Usman at this point in time.
Maybe.
It's tough. So that's why I went with two fighters who I think are very well-rounded and have good enough clinch work, good enough takedown defense, and much better striking. I went with JDM and Shavkat. Okay. Another video where I would go with JDM and Shavkat. They're just both so well-rounded that their striking completely outclasses Belal, and their takedown defense and their grappling and even their bottom work and their wrestling does enough to be able to get through rounds and get that fight back to the feet or even get out of it. And even, you know, you could see Shavkat take Belal's back and submit him pretty easily.
My second pick was Shavkat as well, which is going to be Belal's next opponent at 310. My backup pick was going to be JDM, but the reason I didn't pick JDM over any of my other two was because we've seen him get taken down by Gilbert Burns and he wasn't able to get up for a little bit. See, he did good in that fight, don't get me wrong, he did really good and he moved up the rankings and he eventually got the finish. But someone like Belal, who's just extremely dominant, doesn't let you have any rest, super active in that Leon fight. I think that's the best Belal we've ever seen, even though he's already, 36?
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I think that JDM would have some serious problems with the pressure of Belal. JDM sometimes, again, one of those fighters who is so technically sound, he just doesn't get dirty with it sometimes. So if he's down 2 rounds in the beginning, it could be tough for him to get motivation.
Yeah, so one more thing is I think with JDM and Shavkat is I think that they are more well-rounded than Leon Edwards. You know, I think that their striking, all three of them have on-par striking, but I do think that JDM and Shavkat are more well-rounded, which also makes it harder for Belal and Khabib to game plan for it.
Well, and Shavkat's so strong, right?
Exactly.
In that clinch, he's just so powerful.
But you know that Belal has Khabib in his corner, game planning, figuring out your exact weakness, which also makes Belal so tough.
Yeah, it's not even fair.
Honestly, yeah. All right, let's move on to middleweight. Who is Dricus's toughest matchup?
So my first pick is someone who literally just fought and who I was really impressed with. Could have gotten the first 50-41 scorecard in UFC history, but the fight ended in the 5th round. I went with Fluffy Hernandez.
Really?
Yeah.
I was not impressed with how Fluffy couldn't put away that fight.
It's fair, but honestly, it's weird. These new gloves, man, I'm blaming the gloves. I've seen some statistics. Twitter knows what statistics I'm talking about. It's bad. These new gloves suck.
My first middleweight I'm going with is Khamzat Chimaev. I think that Dricus has really good wrestling, but I think that Chimaev has elite wrestling and he can take him down. And I think that depending on what we see in this Whitaker fight, like if Chimaev is able to look good if it goes to a 4th and a 5th round, I think he's extra tough for Dricus just because they're both going to be so scrambly and it's just going to be like wonky and it's just going to be like disaster and the ugliest fight maybe ever. But I think that Chimaev could come out on top over Dricus.
Both of them are going to get so tired in that fight. If it goes to a 5th round, we've seen Dricus gas out after 3 rounds. We see Khamzat gas out after 2 rounds. They're just going to be throwing hands and just closing their eyes. Dricus with his no-look takedowns. That would be a good fight, honestly.
Yeah, and I think that Dricus probably has the advantage on the feet slightly, but I don't think it's like majorly. Like, I don't think Dricus goes out and he sleeps Chimaev.
No, I doubt that. My second pick was also Khamzat. If he gets past Rob, I don't see much hope for Dricus, to be honest. If Dricus beats Rob Whittaker, Sean Strickland, Izzy, and then Khamzat, he is undeniable. Like, that would be insane.
Don't talk about it.
And did you know that Dricus and Hernandez were actually scheduled to fight in 2022, but it fell through? So that would have been an interesting matchup. I was impressed by Hernandez in the way that he was able to just keep going. His cardio was phenomenal.
Gas tank was crazy.
Absolutely insane. I don't think he's Mexican, but I'm just going to stop talking. I was going to say Mexican gas tanks are crazy, but I was like, I don't know if he's Mexican. He looked like it. Hernandez, come on.
All right. My second guy is Pereira, not Michelle Pereira.
I sure hope not.
Alex Pereira. I just think that it actually is a possibility that Pereira could go down or Dricus would go up to Pereira. So we're not talking about divisions. We're talking about champions' worst nightmares. Pereira could easily sleep Dricus with one punch.
Yeah.
And we really haven't seen Pereira's takedown defense really tested outside of Jan Blachowicz, but we haven't seen it tested within the last 2 years. So post-Ankalaev fight be really telling of how Dricus could game plan for Pereira. And I do think that if they fought, I would definitely favor Pereira. But I think you also have to consider what weight class they're at too.
Yeah, exactly. If they're at light heavyweight, I would heavily favor it, probably like minus 200 Pereira. If they're at middleweight, I would probably give Dricus the edge.
Yeah, it's honestly a fair shout.
Yeah, Dricus's wrestling is actually really strong.
Yeah. All right, let's move it on to light heavyweight and Alex Pereira. Who's his toughest opponent?
So this one's so obvious. It's obviously going to be Ankalaev as the first person.
Yeah, the only guy in light heavyweight that we haven't really seen Pereira chin and that actually has a chance of fighting Pereira. So the guy who has wrestling and good striking, fair enough.
Yeah, and then my second pick was someone who he's already fought and who he got a very close decision with. I went with Jan Blachowicz again. Ooh. In a rematch, I know it wouldn't be an exciting fight, but I could honestly see Pereira still having the same difficulties as he did in the first fight.
Ain't Jan Blachowicz like 60 now?
Yeah.
Dude is so old.
I think so.
He walked into the ring with a cane.
Yeah, and then he'll chin Pereira.
So I went with Pereira being a nightmare matchup for Dricus du Plessis, but I also went with Dricus du Plessis being a nightmare matchup for Alex Pereira. I think that Dricus is honestly a tougher matchup for Pereira than Ankalaev. I think at middleweight, obviously Dricus is a tougher matchup, but even at light heavyweight.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, Dricus is huge.
He is so big that I think he wouldn't really have too big of an issue going up to light heavyweight. And I just think that he's so weird, and we saw Khalil Roundtree not be the most orthodox of strikers, and it really was weird for Pereira. So coming in with Dricus, who it's really hard to train against and to mirror.
That's actually a good show because Khalil Roundtree, his attacks were blitzing in, and we saw the same thing with Dricus. He blitzes in on Adesanya, and Adesanya couldn't even counter him, which was weird.
Yeah. All right, let's move it on to our first heavyweight champion. Let's talk about Jon Jones first.
Okay, Jon Jones, his first nightmare matchup is the guy he actually does have nightmares about. It's Tom Aspinall.
Yeah. Tom Aspinall is in Jon Jones's head, rent-free, hanging out, Motel 6 type beat.
Old heads aren't gonna like that.
Oh, Jon Jones, greatest pound for pound of all time.
Yeah, he's also old now. You know, he's 37.
Jon Jones has always ducked the elite strikers. He ducked Ngannou. He ducked Aspinall. That's why Aspinall and Ngannou are his nightmare matchups. I went Ngannou after seeing what he just did last weekend. Oh, did you see like the brain scans afterwards?
Yeah. I didn't even think about Ngannou. That's such a good shout.
I think that there's a chance Ngannou comes back to the UFC.
I don't even want to say mine anymore. I couldn't think.
There's no other person.
No one is a nightmare matchup.
No. It's Lily Aspinall and then no one.
Yeah.
So who's your second guy?
My second guy was someone who Aspinall just chinned. It's Curtis Blades.
Oh.
Because he's well-rounded. He's not going to get submitted easily by Jones like Gon did. Any striker like Pavlovich or Volkov, you're getting submitted in 2 rounds against Jones. We saw Tom Aspinall submit Volkov in 1 round. Right? So we're not going to see a striker do well against Jones, I don't think. It's going to have to be someone who's well-rounded. And even though Blades is chinny, Jones doesn't have a lot of power. He hasn't been able to chin Anthony Smith in 5 rounds. He hasn't been able to chin a lot of middleweights moving up to light heavyweight. So I think that Blades, if his chin survives, maybe he has a weird fluky shot. I don't know.
You never know. All right, let's move on to Aspinall. My first guy for Aspinall is Francis Ngannou.
Okay.
The only guy that I think has a chance to be more powerful than Tom Aspinall in terms of the striking, and what we saw Francis Ngannou do on the ground there looked like Ngan Khabib.
Yeah. You say Ngan Khabib?
Yeah, that ground and pound was gnarly.
Yeah. I didn't know we were doing Tom Aspinall, so this is just a bonus round for you. Go for your second person.
It has to also be Jon Jones.
Okay, well, you just said the same people.
Yeah.
That was so boring.
Here, guys. Sorry. Just because the wrestling of Jon Jones, you really don't know how Tom would have fared on the ground against Jon Jones. Does have elite wrestling. Every elite striker Jon Jones goes out and faces, like you said, he submits them in 2 rounds. What's stopping Tom Aspinall from being different than those guys? His black belt.
Yeah, I think Tom Aspinall is more powerful than a lot of guys Jones has fought. Remember, we've only seen one fight, Jones being at heavyweight, and that was against Gane, who just didn't look like he was trying very hard. I know I'm coping right now, but still, he didn't look like he was trying. He got submitted really fast. If we see him go up against Tom, who has power and a lot of weight, like he's naturally 255, 260, he's freaking huge. And Jones, again, he's used to facing smaller competition, so I don't know. I could see it being really difficult for both of them. Like that would be one of those matchups where it's like Topuria Holloway,
or like I just said with Pereira Dricus.
Yeah, who knows?
That's gonna do it for us today. Let us know who you think each Champion's Nightmare matchup is, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
See ya.